Hey, what's up, Spartan Nation? Welcome to another episode of the Spartan Nation Podcast. Here with your host, Matt Lonsberry, and my co host, Aiden McCrone. Just wanted to jump on and react to some Michigan State basketball that happened over the weekend. A loss to Wisconsin that we wanted to talk about a little bit. But also, it is NFC Championship Sunday here. So, Aiden, as we kind of let some people come into the live stream, let's just talk Lions for a little bit, just to again let some people come in. So, how do you feel about the game tonight between the Lions and 49ers? Who do you like in this one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a dog in this fight, but I do
Okay.
I do think the 49ers they look pretty good. I think, Green Bay had a good run in the playoffs. They went down to Dallas and beat them, and then, they made it close with the Niners, and the Niners pulled away. And I think ultimately they're the better team. I don't want to crush the Lions fans' hopes. I think what they've achieved already, um, is definitely more than what they asked for, and what they got a lot in return. And I think Dan Campbell has done a really good job, by all means. And Brad Holmes is a really good GM, and they rebuilt that team in 3 years. I mean, they just rebuilt that whole franchise in 3 years. They
Yeah.
erased all like 40, 50 years of losing. So I think, win or lose, I think a lot of Lions fans are, happy how the season went. So we'll see. But I think the Niners are gonna be the team of destiny for the NFC.
All right. That's disappointing. No, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Going over to a watch party later tonight to take in the game, so that'll be fun. Looking forward to it. Go Lions. So, all right. With that, we'll kind of get into some things here. We got a few people in the audience here, so we'll talk about the subject at hand, which is just reacting to the last week and a half or so that Michigan State basketball has had. Unfortunately, that includes the loss to Wisconsin on Friday. And in a game that Michigan State never really felt like they made a move to win that game. It felt like Wisconsin was in control from start to finish, which was really disappointing. It's always going to be tough to go on the road and win against any Big Ten opponent, but especially a good Big Ten opponent like Wisconsin. But to not even like I don't want to say they weren't in the game, but there was like this. It seems like they were at arm's length throughout the whole game, and that was disappointing. So, your reaction to that game, Aiden, and what you saw from it?
Yeah, I mean, the defense really struggled. I think that
Yeah,
was the biggest thing that stood out to me is, they tried pretty much every lineup. They tried a two big lineup where, I think it was Kohler and Cooper were out there at the same time for a while, and then, Kohler and Sissoko, and they tried to match Wisconsin's size, but it only made matters worse for them. I think,
yeah,
they don't have that guy who can play the stretch, that can guard a stretch four, or a guy like, what's his name, Crowell for Wisconsin, who can, who's a center that can, go out to the perimeter and shoot. And MSU just doesn't have that kind of player. And I think they do. It's just on the bench with Xavier Booker. So,
yeah.
and that's a whole, another story that we
Well, we're
can
gonna
we
talk
can
about it.
dive
Yeah,
into. Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna talk
Um,
about that for sure.
but outside of that, I think, yeah, I think the freshmen just need some more minutes. And I
Yeah,
think, Cohen Carr only playing 12 minutes. I thought he did well when he was guarding AJ Store, who, is a 6'7" big. Looks like we lost Matthew there, but I'll keep going. I mean, Cohen Carr could have guarded Store. I think, getting him more minutes. Malik Hall has been, up and down with his consistency. I thought he played all right, but, I think Carr, in the limited minutes that he's gotten, has been productive defensively, and, offensively. We know that his athleticism can carry him. And then, I thought, Hogard played well, and, Tyson's done really well this whole season, but he can't do it every game. And that was a thing against Wisconsin, is, when you have Malik Hall, AJ Hogard, and Tyson Walker, you're kind of big three per se. Um, if one of them's struggling, then the whole team's struggling. They need more help from Jaden Akins. They need, Kohler to come off the bench and give them more points. They need Carr to get more minutes and get some more run to score more. So I think there's a lot that can be improved, and I thought they played well against Minnesota and Rutgers, who are two kind of fringe teams but are really tough. And then they just kind of lost it all against Wisconsin.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I didn't, and Todd Super Gingers in the comments and said, yeah, the floor spacing was bad with the two center lineup. I didn't like it at all. I kind of, I was gonna say like I kind of get going to it just because they got out rebounded so bad in the first game against Wisconsin, but at the same time, like it's 2024 and we're throwing two centers out there. That's just I don't understand the that's like looking 10 15 years in the past for solutions, and I just don't know that was and it wasn't just like they tried it and it didn't work, and so Michigan State went away from it. They trotted two centers out there quite often throughout the game, and it just didn't have the effect that that Izzo and the staff thought it would. They still got out rebounded by 10, and you limited yourself on offense. So it was just it was a strategy that didn't work, and it was disappointing. And to your point about having somebody who can guard a stretch four, you mentioned Xavier Booker. Yeah, I know Cohen Carr is a little undersized for the four spot, but he makes up for a lot of that with his athleticism and his ability to meet you at the high point. And so again, would have liked to seen those guys get a little bit more run. Let's talk about that a little bit here, because at the end of the game, Xavier plays the last 5 minutes, scores 5 points. I think in both of those buckets were against Michigan or Wisconsin's regular rotation, or I don't know necessarily starters, but still part of the regular rotation, because Wisconsin didn't sub in the end of their bench until there was like a minute left. And so, yeah, it's a small sample size. The game at that point was pretty well decided, but still, he comes in, he knocks down a three. He had that little the little mid-range jump shot that goes, and then you look at the box score, and Mady Sissoko has 2 points in 22 minutes. Jackson Kohler doesn't score in 14 minutes or something similar to that, and you start to question why he's not getting more playing time. Now, we have seen, there was one game I was at this year. It was at the Breslin Center, and Xavier got in second quarter or so, or second quarter, late first half, maybe even mid first half, and he got pushed around a little bit in the post. He was guarding an opposing center. It might have been the Minnesota game at home. He got pushed around a little bit, and so you kind of see, when Izzo's talking about how he needs to see more from Xavier, you kind of, I can see what Izzo's talking about there. But at the same time, the kid's got a ton of upside, and we know what Carson Cooper is. We know what Mady Sissoko is, and at this point, when you're 4 and 5 now in Big Ten play, if it's not time now to roll the dice and take a chance on these freshmen, I just don't know when it will be time. So your thoughts now on the freshmen and the lack of playing time, Aiden, and just give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, Malik Hall plays a lot at that 4 spot, and when he's not playing, it kind of just rotates whoever. It could be, that 2 big lineup. It could be Carr. It just is kind of game by game basis, but it looks like that, it's for the taking for Booker and Carr. And I think, I know we're not there in the day to day to see kind of how they practice and stuff, and Izzo will talk about, he needs to practice better and everything like that. But from what we've seen in the limited game time, it's hard to evaluate when it's, he's getting in at the end of the game, when it's like
Sure.
it almost doesn't matter. But from what we've seen, it looks like from our perspective that there's every reason that he should play more, because what we're seeing from, from Sissoko and Cooper, um, they can give quality minutes, but I think the fact that they're getting, you know, 25 minutes a game is a little crazy. I think they should, that could be reduced down, and I think they'll be more efficient that way. And I think, to Todd's point about he said Tyson's starting to wear down. I think, you know, Tyson, Hogard, Akins, Hall, Sissoko. I think that whole starting five is starting to wear down, because, we talked a lot about the depth that they could have, coming into the season, and now that we're in the season, it's kind of the same five guys are playing, and then the bench just rotates every game. So, the
Yeah.
guys who are coming off the bench are fresh, but that starting five is just it looks like they're burnt out already. Um, and I think it shows in their minutes. I think Tyson's played over 30 minutes pretty much every game this year. Hogarth's very similar. Um, but yeah, I think it's imperative that, the two freshmen that are still, playing, need, like Carr and Booker. I think they both need to get more minutes. And yeah, I don't know if it's not now. I don't know when it's gonna be, but they have a very manageable schedule like coming
Yep.
up. I will say, I think, they have, I'm looking at it right now. They, after the Michigan game, their schedule in February is Maryland at home, at Minnesota, Illinois at home, at Penn State, at Michigan, Iowa at home, and Ohio State at home in
Yeah.
February. And I think they have to win all of those games. Including the Illinois game. I mean, I don't know. You can say what you feel about that, but I think they really have to win all of those games to, just stay in the tournament, and, have hopes of getting a higher seed and maybe getting an extra bye in the Big Ten tournament to kind of just save the health of this team.
No, I actually completely agree with you. Just because, again, like we've left the preseason expectations in the rearview mirror for a while
Yeah.
now. I think we did that, 3, 4, 5 games into the season, just with the way things got started. But at the same time, like, this is still a very talented team, and we're not going to completely just like erase expectations for this program. And I wrote down before we got started here, including this season, going back to these last 4 years, since the COVID break, if that's what we want to call it. But since then, Michigan State is 35 and 33 in Big Ten play. That's 2 games above 500, or 1 game, however that works. But like, that's just not good enough for this program. Like, that's not what this program has been historically. That's not the expectations that this program has, and it's just not good enough for what this program expects to be. This is a program who expects to compete for and win Big Ten championships, um, compete for every year, and win them quite often, if we're being honest. And
Mhm.
so this just hasn't been good enough this 4 year stretch. And it was supposed to turn around this year with bringing in this recruiting class, and then we see, I mean, the thing what happened with Jeremy Fears, that's just unfortunate. That's not
Right.
anybody's
You
fault
can't
except
account
for,
for that. Yeah.
yeah, that's not anybody's fault except for the guy who pulled the trigger. Okay, that's like, so I'm not like that. And he was playing before that happened. So that's just unfortunate. But we've seen some really good things from Cohen this year. But he's not on the floor consistently. And whether that's his fault or Izzo's or the coaching staff's fault, is up for debate. But I would lean more towards the coaching staff at this point, because we're in
Mhm.
we're in late January now. So even if, and I get Izzo's thing about freshmen have to earn their way onto the floor. I respect that, but we're 2.5 months into the season now. If these freshmen haven't earned their way onto the floor yet, as talented as they were coming out of high school, that's a reflection on the coaching, in my opinion. Like, what's going on in practice? Like, why isn't the development not happening faster for these guys? In the case of Xavier Booker, yeah, he's a tall, skinny kid, and it's hard to add weight in season. So I get that one a little bit more. But this isn't just I don't think you can just point the finger at the freshmen. Well, they're just not ready. Well, why aren't they ready? That would be my
Hmm.
follow up question. So, yeah, it's not good enough. And so I completely agree with you about this next stretch of games. Um, Michigan's the worst team in the Big Ten. You need to beat them twice. Maryland, you beat them at their place. Now you get them at home. Minnesota on the road is somewhat of a tough game, but again, that's a program you expect to be better than.
Hmm.
Penn State, same thing. And then you get Iowa and Ohio State at home. Illinois is the tough game, but Michigan State needs to win one of these games where they're playing a tough opponent and it's at home. They did that early in the year against Baylor in Detroit. That was essentially a home game. Um, and I agree. I completely agree with you. Like they should go on a stretch here where they just start stacking wins. I don't know if I expect that to happen just because this team has been very
Yeah.
inconsistent year all throughout the year. But as far as like
Mhm.
what the fan base's expectations should be, it should be to win these next 7 or 8 games.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think if, they drop to Illinois and then they drop, say at Minnesota and they still win the rest of those games, I think that, that's kind of expected. I think that anything less of that would be a disappointment, but I think if they, that 9-game stretch, if they go 7-2, I think that's, pretty good. I think, playing a rival, you never know what's going to happen, but this Michigan team is not good
They're
at
bad.
all. And and if you get them at home and without, Doug McDaniel, who, you know, I know they're not that great, but he's still a pretty good player. You still got to win, with when they don't have him. And then when you go to Michigan, even with him, you still have the better guards. You still have the better
Yeah,
backcourt. So I think there's no room for excuses. And to go back to what you were saying about the coaching staff, it it's looking like it's the coaching staff's fault than the players' fault. Sh- you can look at the rest of the front court that MSU has besides Xavier Booker and see how their development has been. I
yeah,
think Carson Cooper is developed the best because he didn't have a lot of expectations coming
sure.
in, but Sissoko was a high 4-star, Kohler's a 4-star guy, and you know, they're still struggling. And, Sissoko's been there for 4 years now. And, his development has taken, a big step, but it's still not to, the expectation of this program, I think. And that's a big reflection on the coaching staff. And I think maybe losing Dwayne Stevens, who was more of kind of a coach the forwards, I think that hurts a lot. But I think, Tom Izzo's got to find an assistant that can coach the bigs as well as he did for a long time, because that's a valuable asset. And especially in the Big Ten, where you play, these teams like Wisconsin, you play, Purdue every year, so you gotta have a front court that's strong. And you know they can play physical, they can rebound, they can score against guys who are 7'3" that you're not going to get, because it's shown that they're not Izzo's not going to go recruit a 7'3" guy. He's going to go get a dude who's 6'10", which is fine, but you got to teach him the ways of how Big Ten basketball is played.
For sure. Obviously, with Jackson, uh, I do think he's played so little over these last few games as he's trying to get back
Mhm.
into game shape and all of that. But I do think he has played pretty well in his limited time. Um, I think Michigan State desperately needs him to uh, continue to build up his stamina and to be able to play longer as he continue or comes back from that foot injury. Um, I'm intrigued by Jackson, if because he does have an offensive skill set, and a guy you can throw the ball down
Mhm.
to in the post and can make some moves and score down there. So I'm interested to see in that. I saw somebody tweet, I can't remember who it was, but just one more note on this that two center lineup that they ran out there against Wisconsin. But the tweet said Michigan State played uh, their two front court players at the same time, except they didn't choose the two most talented ones, which would have been Jackson Kohler and Xavier Booker. I mean,
Hmm.
if those two played at the same time, yeah, who knows what happens defensively, but offensively, like you got a lot more firepower with those two on the floor together as opposed to Madi and Carson. And to your point about development, I feel like Madi has kind of hit his ceiling. Like for one thing, he's a senior, but also like
Hmm.
I remember, watching him as a sophomore, and he was just kind of a guy that Michigan State threw out there when they were in foul trouble, and Monty could go kind of just play rough with the opponent's big men, and that's kind of what his role was. He has developed beyond that, but he's hit his ceiling there, and I just don't think there's much more to be um, gained there. Um, to your point about Carson, he was an under recruited guy. Um, might have redshirted that first year, but was played his way into the rotation a little bit last year as a true freshman. I do think he has developed, but again, there's it seems like there's a kind of a ceiling or a cap on him, and so that's why I'm
Hmm.
intrigued by Jackson. Because he was a high prospect, a high 4-star prospect, and so he needs to, or Michigan State needs to make the most of that talent that they have, and so but I think you make a good point about Dwayne Stevens as well. Um, let's get into the Michigan preview a little bit here. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but again, just going back to this matchup, Michigan State's coming off of a loss. I'm not sure. Oh yeah, Michigan just got hammered by Purdue, I think, on the road, and maybe they played another game since then. But
Yeah.
they're not a good team. Um, I guess Aiden, let's look. You mentioned like it is a rivalry game, and so you never know. But like, what's your expectation for this game? Because mine is pretty clear as far as what I expect to see out of Michigan State at home with the Wolverines coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna be a test for the front court again, just because I do think, Terrace Reed is a solid player.
Yeah.
Olivier Kamwa is a solid
Hmm.
player.
He is.
Um, but that said, I still expect them to win big. I think, the guard play that MSU has is, head and shoulders better than Michigan's.
For
And
sure.
I don't think there's really an excuse or anything more I can say besides that. And I think, you know, everything besides the front court is to MSU's advantage. And if they don't win and if they don't beat them twice this year,
Yeah.
I think that's a huge disappointment. And I get, again, like I said, rivalries, you never know what's going to happen. But, this Michigan team is not like they look lost.
Yep. That's a
And
good way of
that's
putting it.
all I can say.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a team that was kind of cobbled together through the transfer portal.
Mm,
Mostly, a few in-house guys like you mentioned, Terrace Reed. Doug McDaniel won't be playing this first one
mm.
on the road, which that whole situation is just weird anyway. But we won't get into that.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
that's a different podcast discussion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think my expectation would be for Michigan State to this one at home to win pretty soundly. One thing about this Michigan State team, which is different from years past, is they don't turn the ball over like a lot of Izzo's teams over the last decade. And this feels like if Michigan State is able to limit those turnovers, I just have a hard time seeing Michigan staying close because Michigan's defense is so bad that even Michigan State's offense, which just kind of comes and goes at times, should be able to get good looks throughout the game. And so I just think Michigan State is gonna hammer Michigan pretty good on Tuesday. The one in Ann Arbor, I don't think Michigan State has won in Ann Arbor since Juwan Howard was hired, for what that's worth. But I agree with you. I think this is the year that Michigan State needs to win both games of the rivalry. And I expect to see that on Tuesday, the first half of that, I guess. Aiden, let's dig into a topic that we're certainly not the first ones to talk about this, um, but I don't think we've talked about this yet. So let's talk about Tom Izzo's future a little bit. Last week, or well, let's see, today's Sunday, so maybe it was a week and a half or so ago. He was asked a question about retirement and with Nick Saban walking away
Mhm.
from football, Jay Wright walking away from basketball, Roy Williams, Mike Krzyzewski, those guys. That was kind of like the context of the question, like with a lot of these big names walking away from their sports, where are you at? And Tom said that he wouldn't be retiring after this season, and he won't have a farewell tour like some coaches have had, or even some
Mhm.
players have had in recent years. Um, so I guess where are you at on this? Because obviously Tom Izzo is a legend. He's a Hall of Famer, and that legacy won't be touched.
Mhm.
But he's been very resistant to the transfer portal, as has been very clear. Um, and this is now, the fourth season in a row where Michigan State is kind of just in the middle of the pack of the Big Ten. And so, where are you at with Tom Izzo? Like, what are your thoughts here? I know this is kind of a big subject, but and I'm throwing it out of you out of the blue. But give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to evaluate with that. I think you look at Mark D'Antonio's tenure and kind of at the end there, you reach the peak, you win, Big Ten championships, and then you have that 3-9 slip up season, and then you go 10-3, and you kind of slide down to 7-5, and then 6-6, and then eventually retire. And it looks like it's a similar trajectory with that too. I mean, you look at the 2019 2020 team where it looks like, okay,
Yeah.
they're about to cash in all their chips after a Final Four. They're going back, to win the national championship with Cassius Winston in his senior year. And then, COVID happens, the tournament's not there, and then everything just kind of seems to have fallen apart. So um it's hard to tell. I will say one positive thing about what Izzo's done in kind of this modern era is he hasn't gotten transfers, but he's retained a lot. I think the
That's
fact
fair.
that they don't have a whole lot of turnover. I mean, they lost Pierre Brooks this year, who's been good at Butler. Who I can't remember who they lost I mean, they lost so I mean like Rocket Watts
Rocket
to like
Watts.
a
Yeah.
couple of years before, but he's been able to retain his guys, and I think you know he mentioned that about AJ Hogard. He said he could have, everyone like he was like everyone, talks about Hogard and criticizes him, but the fact that he stayed with it the whole time and hasn't left speaks, on his character and like how much he's, come by and everything. So I think that's that's a positive, but yeah, at the same time, not using the transfer portal, I think they are kind of still using the recruiting that they have been for a long time, and they still have all pretty much all I think all their assistant coaches are guys who went other places and then came back who were assistants, at least a decade or more ago. I mean, Wojcik went, was an assistant here for a while and then went to go be a head coach somewhere and then came back. Same thing with Montgomery and everything like that. So um yeah, I think there needs to be a little bit new blood in the assistant coaching group. I know there's a lot of like former players too, who are coaches or work kind of in the support staff. So I think new blood is necessary, but I think Izzo is very stuck in his old ways because of how long it's worked.
Sure.
But I think now it's starting to catch up with him, and we're starting to see that. Uh, but yeah, I mean, again, like we've talked about, there's still a lot of talent on this team, but it's just it doesn't seem to be being utilized properly. And I think that's 100% on the coaching staff. So we'll see. I think it's catching up to him. And I think he's very prideful, and I don't know if he's gonna hang it up. I don't think he wants to hang it up, but I think
Yeah.
sooner or later it's gonna have to happen because it's gonna be doing more harm than help.
Yeah. No, and I don't. even though I bring up this topic, like I'm not suggesting that it's time right now. Like I don't believe
No.
that. And I know that you're not. That's not what you're saying either. But I just want to make that clear for the audience.
Yeah.
I don't think that time is now. I for Michigan State's benefit though, I do think um, Tom has to at least loosen up his attitude towards the transfer portal a little bit. Like you don't have to go out and try to do like what Michigan did this last offseason. Like that
Mhm.
stuff's not going to work. You can't just overturn your whole or half of your roster and have
Right.
no chemistry. So I'm not suggesting that, but like what Wisconsin did was they brought a bunch of guys back from last year and they went in the portal and they added one guy, and that was AJ Storr, who has cooked Michigan State in both of these games for 20 plus. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about here is um, identify a, a position of need and go get a guy who is going to come in and be your starter in that position. Whether that's a big, whether that's a another four to play alongside Malik Hall, who I will say, outside of that Northwestern game, I think this is the best stretch of Malik Hall's career.
Hmm.
He's scored in double figures in 8 consecutive games. Um, he's rebounded pretty well during that stretch as well. So hats off to Malik for that. But back to my point. Yeah, you gotta identify a guy who it can just be one guy, but that's made a big difference for Wisconsin this year. And then you've got Connor Estesian, who's a sharpshooter coming off the bench and playing who knows how many minutes, 12, 13 minutes, and just being a weapon off the bench. And so,
Hmm.
um, Greg Gard has done well in that regard. And I guess I would like to see uh, a little bit more of that from Izzo and the staff is just identifying a guy who they can go and pitch and try to bring to East Lansing to just supplement the roster. It doesn't have to be a total overhaul. So
I guess my question would be, what do you think is his like holdup for the transfer portal? I would say, like, what do you think is his, what's holding him back from utilizing that?
um well I think Tom has kind of built the Michigan State program around a unity and a loyalty. And for the majority of his tenure, like the transfer portal wasn't a thing. And so if somebody left, you had to
Hmm.
sit out a year. And so that was like a deterrent. But there is a brotherhood and a connectiveness to Michigan State's program. I think that's reflected in the way that past players talk about Izzo. And the love that they have for the program. We seen Kalen Lucas come back to the Breslin this year. We saw Drew Neitzel come back this year. Other guys as well. But I think there is that there's the other programs. It seems like, um, especially in the modern era, it's just kind of a feeder program to the NBA. Like I think of Kentucky that way. I do. Um, it's a very storied program, but since Calipari's been there, that's kind of how I view that program is a feeder program for the NBA. Duke to a lesser degree, but a little bit more over these last 5 or 6 years. You think about Zion, you think about RJ Barrett and guys like that who were just kind of there for a year and then they're off to the NBA. So Michigan State's not hasn't been that program. They've had some guys like that, but even guys like Miles Bridges stuck around for 2 years. Jaren Jackson was an exception, but he was very talented and he's had a very good NBA career. So I guess that brotherhood, I'm wondering if Izzo is worried about losing that, which is kind of the core of the program. And so I get that a little bit. You bring in a transfer, you lose a transfer. That's the line that he kind of throws out pretty
Hmm.
often. But I guess my rebuttal would be, well, Pierre Brooks left anyway, just because of
Hmm.
the recruiting class that you brought in. So, and I don't bemoan Pierre for that. I think it was probably the right move for him, and I don't think Michigan State was impacted that much by it. Sure, you would love to keep your guys and continue to develop them, but that wasn't a back-breaking transfer, if you catch my drift. So, but to answer your question, I think that's maybe where it lies is just worried about losing that core tenet of the program.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think From all accounts, from what I've heard and other people have heard about the Tyson Walker transfer, I knew that had from what everyone said, that took a lot of convincing from the assistants to convince Tom to bring him in, because he didn't know who Walker was. But now that he's there, it's he's been successful. I think Tom really likes him, and he's all bought into the program. And I think you know that is a reference, a point of reference for him to use is, hey, I didn't use the transfer portal, but the one time I did, I brought in a person I never knew, and it turned out fine. So I
Yeah,
think that's something he doesn't look at as much. I think a lot of the transfer players that he's brought in the past, I mean, you look at Joey Hauser, you look at Aaron Harris. I'm sure there's other guys before that I'm missing, before the transfer portal era, that he recruited in high school, who left their program and then came, but he had that relationship already built through high school. I mean, you look at Bryn Forbes as a guy who Denzel Valentine was his teammate in high school. So he had that kind of relationship there. And I think that's what you were talking about with the loyalty and kind of the brotherhood of that program is, I think he's a little weary of not having like a previous relationship with a player when, they enter the portal. And I think that's something that just in this modern age, we look at football and that doesn't really matter at all. But to Tom, it does. So,
yeah,
um, yeah, I think that's part of um, the problem, and I respect that, the fact
yeah,
that you want to have that relationship and kind of have that trust there already. But it's a chance that you have to take, especially in a season like not this season, but last season, when you only had what 10 scholarship players. I think that
sure.
was because we could be seeing that again this upcoming season
Yeah,
or off
and that's
season.
why I go back to my point. It maybe it's just one guy that you
Hmm.
go
Right.
recruit and try to just supplement your roster with. I don't and good players want to play with good players too. And so I feel like
Hmm.
the core of your team, yeah, there might be a guy who is a little miffed by a transfer getting brought in at his position or his role or something like that. But I think if you go out and land a guy who is going to help a team improve, I think that goes away uh, pretty quickly amongst the majority of the roster anyway. Like, yeah, that one guy might be upset, but if it's an upgrade, then that's just the nature of college athletics now. Unfortunately,
Hmm.
I do think I'm hopeful in the years to come that we're going to see some reform and a little bit more of a structure around the transfer portal and
Hmm.
NIL. I am anticipating that, looking forward to it, I should say, because what's going on right now is not sustainable. Let's answer Todd's question here. He asked percentage on tournament odds. He's at a 55%. I haven't looked at any bracketology stuff lately, but I did see, I think, I don't know if it's the latest from Joe Lenardi, but he had Michigan State as an 8 seed, I want to say. Mike DeCourcy is Fox College Hoops, and he had them maybe a little lower than that, maybe an 11 seed. I can't remember exactly. So I'll give my answer first. I don't know about percentage chance. I guess I'll go. I'm higher than Todd though. I'm thinking I'm at about a 75. I would say. I think Michigan State is in a safe spot right now. I think they'd really have to struggle down the stretch to fall out of the tournament. And so I'm higher than Todd. At about a 75, maybe even pushing 80 from where I'm at. I think they're safe, but making the tournament is like the baseline expectation for this program. They've done it, 25, 26 years in a row, and so that's like the minimum requirement. So even though I think they're safe, that doesn't excuse what this season has been so far, if that makes sense.
No, I was gonna say kind of exactly that. I'm with you. That's kind of the catch right there. Is I do think there's a high percentage chance they do make the tournament, I'm probably around like 80%. If they, even if they win all the games they're supposed to, and if they drop, say, 4 or even 5 games, I still think they're in, just based off of, previous history and everything like that. But, again, that's the baseline. That's the bare minimum of what this program is, what they expected to be this season, and then what they expect to be every season as well. So I think, yeah, that's the big catch here. And I think the question shouldn't be percentage on the tournament, but like how deep of a run can they make?
Yeah,
Are they able to be, competitive and make another Final Four? Can they, compete for a national championship? I don't know about this year, but you know, I think college basketball right now, there's not
yeah,
really a team that stands out at number one. I don't, I think UConn, I think Houston, Purdue are all really good, but I don't think they're, invincible. I think, every team is very beatable. There's no, historic um kind of team this year. So but we'll see. So I think MSU has an opportunity. I think, Final Four is always on the table every year, but the
yeah,
way that the road to it is not always going to be, if they lose 5 games, the road's going to be a lot harder than if they, you know, went out and only lose to Purdue.
sure.
And then they make a deep run in the Big Ten tournament as well.
Yeah, no, that's something that I've been thinking about a lot over the last week and a half, maybe even 2 weeks. Is there's just so much parity in college basketball these days. It's
Hmm.
really it's crazy how often I'm scrolling through Twitter and it was like, oh, this number 7 team lost to an unranked, and badly
Hmm.
sometimes too. And then you look at the teams that made up the Final Four last year. Now UConn, yeah, UConn is, I don't know if they're a blue blood, but they're definitely, if they're not first tier, they're a second tier program, I
Yeah.
would say, out of UConn, and so they win the title. But you had Florida Atlantic in there. You had, I think, Miami.
Hmm.
I can't remember the fourth team, but
San Diego State.
San Diego State. Yeah. So like
Yeah.
you look at that Final Four, and so even with how disappointing things has gone so far for Michigan State, and they don't look like a team right now that can make a run. There is another month or a month and a half really before tournament play starts, and we know this team has talent, and so I certainly believe it could develop into a team that can make a run. And just the nature of college basketball these days, a team can get hot, and that's all it takes really in that 2 or 3 week stretch. So intrigued by that. At the same time, Michigan State could be a first round exit. There's such a wide variety
Hmm.
between those two things, but that's part of that's the nature of college basketball today, and part of it's the nature of this team. Where at times, I mean, that Baylor game, they came out with a fire under their tails, and
Hmm.
just, I mean, they wiped Baylor up and down the floor. Like that was not even competitive.
Hmm.
And then you get a game last night, or not last night, but this last one against Wisconsin. Tough place to play, good opponent, but just never really felt like they were even threatening to Wisconsin in that one. So there's a wide variance there. But yeah, it is wide open. It does feel like more and more every year. I'm already thinking about like my bracket, like filling out my bracket and being like, I have no idea. Like I have no idea who who I'm gonna pick
Hmm.
to go. Part of that's matchups, but it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's making it even harder now. Because yeah, picking a national championship, or yeah, picking a national champion, you never know. Like, I think last year, I think I had like 2 teams in my bracket that lost in the first round, that were supposed, that I had in the
Yeah,
final four. So we'll see. But yeah, I think that makes it like the opportunity even bigger for MSU, with that said, because I think, you have Tom Izzo, who has that pedigree, who's been there before, who's comfortable being in kind of that underdog setting, or kind of being overlooked. That they always seem, the year that you don't expect them to make the Final Four, they always make it. And the year that they make, they don't make the Final Four, they're expected to win national championship. So I think he likes that in a way, and I think, you know maybe that helps them in March, but you can't just turn it on. You can't just go into the tournament and then try to turn it on. You have to start now. And you know, I think stylistically, I think the fact that they do have uh four guards who can play really well at a high level is helpful. I think that that benefits them, outside of the Big Ten competition. But at the same time, you know, you gotta learn to, fight different styles. I think that's something that he struggled with, kind of the new coming of Purdue within the last kind of decade is that they've always struggled against that large lineup. And I mean, playing at Mackey is tough for anyone, but even in the Big Ten tournament, even when they play at home, uh, that's just a bad matchup for them. And it doesn't seem like Tom has changed much from the last decade of Purdue to kind of now where they're more of a juggernaut, and they're really starting to take over the conference. And that's something that isn't MSU, you know even 5 years ago wouldn't allow that, and now it's kind of
For sure.
seeming like it's falling apart.
No, I agree with you. This Michigan State was probably the most consistent team in the Big Ten for a long stretch, probably throughout
Mhm.
uh, Izzo's tenure there, and that Purdue has been the most consistent over the last 4 or 5 years. I think that's fair to say.
Mhm.
And so we'll see if Michigan State can right the ship. I know they've got another strong recruiting class, I think, coming in next year. Um, and we'll see how things wrap up this year, because there are, as we mentioned earlier, there are a lot of winnable games left on the schedule, and we expect this team to win the majority of those. Um, all right, with that, Aiden, I think we'll kind of wrap things up here. We've got about just under 45 minutes before the Ravens and the Chiefs kick off, and so I'm sure people are going to want to tune into those games.
Mhm.
Um, we'll be back later this week to react to the Michigan State game. That'll be it's a rivalry game, and so we'll definitely want to jump on and react to that. Maybe we'll do that Wednesday. We will Aid and I will talk about it and get that figured
Mhm.
out. So yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, check out our content at www.si.com. College, Michigan State. That's where you can find all of our articles covering the basketball and football programs. Would appreciate you guys checking that out for us. And with that, we'll get you out of here. And as always, go Lions as they take on the 49ers later this evening. So appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time.